Aw, come on, bro. Don't tell me this is really you. Using that same staff with that same helmet on. Got the shield and the staff with no backup weapon. I know this is you. But it's okay. I'm here to show you guys the possibilities and my Spellblade build that I've made late game. Spoiler warning, I will be showing some of the later game bosses. I won't be showing any of the endgame bosses like the final boss or the bosses leading up to him, but I will be showing some of the later tougher bosses to show the actual potential of this build. Just to let you know what you guys are getting into, I'll be showing off my build stats, my weapons, the weapons I recommend, the spells, and how it works in PvE and PvP, so you guys can get a good glimpse at what a true Spellblade can look like late game. As usual, subscribing and liking is always appreciated. I also have a Discord in my description if you want to join that, and let's get into the video. So for the stats on the build, the main stats you're going to want to focus on are health, mind, dexterity or strength, whichever one you prefer, and of course your intelligence stat. So before we start, I would like to explain what the soft cap and hard cap means and what the difference is between them, because I see a lot of content creators now talking about them, but I just want to clear up any confusion for people who have them. A soft cap is an ideal stat point you want to put into one stat so that you'd be getting the maximum amount of benefit while keeping it at the lowest it can be at. Meanwhile, the hard cap is the maximum level you can put into that stat to have the best returns, because if you go past that, you'll start to see diminishing returns, which basically means that the amount you're putting into it is not worth the stat investment for what you're actually getting for that stat. For instance, you can see my vigor here is level 40. That's going to be the soft cap for health in general. This soft cap is universal for all builds. Having 40 vigor will give you 1400 health, which is a nice comfortable range to be at so that you don't die to anything in one hit. And as you can see for the rest of my stats, I mainly focused on intelligence to be my primary scaling stat, being my highest at 60 levels, and that is actually the soft cap for intelligence in the game. However, intelligence will scale nicely up until level 80, so you can invest stats into it if you choose to, but I just stopped at 60 so I can put some stat points into some other stats like my dexterity. And as for the rest of my stats, I have 19 mind, 15 endurance, 20 strength, and 30 dexterity. I put 20 strength just so I can use some other weapons, because I like to have a lot of build variety and weapon variety when I make my builds. And what I found in this game is that endurance is scaled up like really high. I haven't leveled up my endurance much past the starting endurance, to be honest, because it's honestly been pretty comfortable being at level 15 only. You don't have to level it up if you're comfortable with playing at lower endurance, so don't feel like you need to, but it is definitely helpful if you want to go that route. And I put 30 into dexterity because of the way scaling works in this game. It's actually a little weird and I'm still figuring it out myself, but it appears that as long as you have a high scaling stat in one of them, the other one is kind of negligible. For example, with the moonveil, how it has a C in dexterity and C in intelligence, you can actually just level up your intelligence and it will do quite fine. You don't really need to upgrade your dexterity that much past the required stat bonuses. But I just leveled it to 30 so I could use more weapons and have a little bit more damage on my dexterity. People say the starting class does not matter, and while it kind of doesn't in the long run, it will help if you're trying to get the absolute best min-max possible. So I chose the prisoner because it was a dexterity intelligence focused build and it had the lowest faith starting stat in the game, being 6. So I chose it so that I wouldn't have any wasted points and I could have as much efficiency in my stat points as possible. But don't let your starting class define you to a build. You can honestly run anything at any point and you should be okay, so don't feel like you have to stay into one build just because you picked a certain starting class at the beginning of the game. Small disclaimer before I get into the weapons, a lot of these weapons are going to be a part of Ranni's questline. She's pretty much the intelligence related questline for this game, so I unfortunately will not be covering how to do the whole questline. I will tell you though that you have to clear Carrier Manor first to start the questline. I have a video showing how to get to Carrier Manor if people are interested. So the great thing about intelligence builds is that they're incredibly versatile. As long as you can buff or infuse something with magic, you can honestly use the weapon. It is very helpful. I see a lot of mages just running the same moonveil, and it just kind of sucks to look at because there's so many cool weapons and so many different build varieties and weapon options that you have as a mage. So the main weapons that I'm using are the Dark Moon Greatsword, Wing of Astel, Moonveil, and the Bastard Stars, as well as any other weapon that you can infuse with magic armament, honestly. And all the weapons I just listed are going to be available through Ranni's questline. The great thing about magic armament is it allows me to use pretty much any weapon because I can buff it with my magic and it will actually be scaling off of my intelligence stat, so I'll be getting best of both worlds because it'll be scaling off of my dexterity stat and then more off of my intelligence stat. For this Spellblade build in particular, I like to incorporate my magic and my weapon attacks at the same time, so I'll be using a lot of offensive weapon arts like Bloodhound Step, Storm Stomp, etc. because it really allows me to capitalize off both of my strengths, being my magic stat and my dexterity stat. I see a lot of people just have shields and use staffs or only use weapons, and this build is really going to focus on using both of them at the same time. For these spells, the number one spell I cannot recommend enough is a Duelist Moonblade. You again get this through Randy's questline when you find Smaragd the Glintstone Dragon on Liurnia Lake, who's guarding the Academy Key. He's going to actually flee and go to a point through Randy's questline called the Moonlight Altar where you can actually kill him there and get a Duelist Moonblade. This is by far the best spell I've seen in the game. It hits people multiple times. It adds a frost buildup and it goes very far and it is very wide, making for a very effective spell that can just shred bosses' healths and people in PvP. It's honestly a really good spell. I can't recommend getting this enough. Your other bread and butter sorceries are going to be Glintstone Comet Shard. It actually got buffed recently, so the FP cost has been reduced and it has made this spell a pretty good spell to use over Glintstone Pebble. Noticeable damage increase, honestly really good spell. Rock Sling is also very good to use both in PvE and PvP. In PvE, it causes a lot of stagger to bosses and it will cause them to stagger so you can get a critical hit very frequently. And in PvP, it's nice for chase down. When people are trying to run away, you can use it and it tracks really well. This spell has very amazing tracking. I would honestly recommend this just as much as a Duelist Moonblade. For the rest of the spells, you can honestly do whatever you want to do. I like to use the Gavel of Hama because it does have a lot of poise break and is good in PvE. I also like to use it in PvP as well to catch people off guard. It does a good amount of damage and can be followed up twice. It also does have hyper armor from what I've seen, which basically means you can't be staggered when you're attacking, so it's pretty good as well. For the armors you're going to want to wear, to be honest, you don't really need to wear any specific armor. There's no like mage armor. I see a lot of people ask this question and there's no real like mage set besides the ones that actually boost your intelligence stat. Like the Twin Sage Glintstone Crown will increase your intelligence by 6, but you will have a detriment of HP and stamina, so I don't really like to use this for that reason. But they do have some head pieces that do increase your intelligence, so you can wear those, like Renala's Crown and the Imp Cat head. Although they do have some headpieces like Lusat's Glintstone Crown and Azor's Glintstone Crown, which both raise Lusat and Azor primeval sorceries respectively, so you can use that to boost your damage, but you will have to use more FP, so keep that in mind. But besides that, not a lot of headpieces are going to be actually boosting your damage. I do know that the Snow Witch's headpiece does boost snow sorceries, so you can wear that if that's what you choose to use primarily, but you can honestly just wear anything you want to. For the Ashes of War, you can honestly use anything that you find fun or comfortable for you and your playstyle, but I do like to use Double Slash because you can use it on heavier weapons and you can do a lot of damage very quickly. And I also like to use Bloodhound Step. Again, it is a very good evasive maneuver if you need to get away. And for PvP, I love using Raptors of the Mist. This is by far my favorite weapon art so far. It basically acts as a counter attack where if you time it on a person when they hit you, you jump into the air and from then you can do a jumping attack, which is why I like to use the Clawmark Seal because it boosts your jumping attacks. Overall, it's a very cool weapon art. I love to use it a lot. For my main talismans, I like to wear Radagon's Icon. This will shorten your spellcasting times. It is pretty noticeable on these slower ones like a Duelist Moonblade. That is the one downside to that spell, but this helps it a lot with that. Another one I like to wear is the Graven Mass Talisman. It will greatly boost the power of your sorcery, so you can just slap that on for a free damage buff. I also like to wear the Claw Talisman because I like to do a lot of jumping attacks, and with a certain weapon art I'll be showing on later, it combos into that weapon art pretty well. And for the last one, we have the Erdtree Favor +2. All of these talismans are pretty endgame talismans besides the Claw Talisman, which you can get fairly early in the game, but they've honestly been pretty good for me. These talismans have had pretty good synergy in my experience, but if you wanted to just wear the minimum, I would say at least get Radagon's Icon and Graven Mass Talisman. The other slots you can do whatever you want, but these two I would recommend highly. Now to show this off in PvP and PvE, we'll be looking at PvP first. This build is pretty much a regular melee build, but it has magic with it, so I like to play up close and personal with the enemy, and I use my magic to complement either from afar or up close. What I like about using this build in PvP is that I can pressure people from afar or up close. I have a lot of different options to use for my weapons. For any situation, I can use a straight sword to get quick hits in and run away. I could switch to an ultra great sword and get really good damage off of that. So honestly, this build has a lot of good uses and is very versatile, especially in invasions when you need to switch between weapons to complement different situations. This build is definitely great for that, not to mention your spells that will also be helping you out as you fight. I'd say the only main downside of this build, and it's probably due to stat investments, is the lack of endurance. Again, you don't need to build your character like I did, but on my character I noticed the lack of endurance at times. I just had to adapt and get used to playing with low endurance. And the low mind as well. If people are looking to play with more of their spells rather than their weapons, they can always upgrade the mind stat more and lower some of their dexterity or strength stats. But the mind is also a little bit of an issue because I have to drink my flasks more often. But it is a pretty comfortable level where I can shoot a couple of sorceries before I have to refill, so it's not that bad. It again just comes down to personal preference on how much you want to use your magic compared to your weapons. For the PVE Showcase, this build will shred bosses, in particular the Dark Moon Greatsword. I've had a lot of success using this both with and without the Mimic tier. When you use the weapon art, it buffs the weapon, and for me, I'm hitting an attack rating of 834, which on a Greatsword is wild. The charged heavy attacks will be shooting out blades of ice moonlight, and that will be hitting bosses for a lot of damage, especially if you can hit the blade and the beam. This weapon is really good in PvE. I would definitely recommend it. It causes frostbite, and when they get frostbitten, the bosses will actually be taking more damage, so I would honestly recommend this weapon a lot. But besides that, your spells and the weapons I listed before are going to do just as well in here as they do in PvP. You will be up close or far away depending on how you want to play, which is why I like this build, because it is very versatile based on what your style of play is. So to have a quick overview before the video ends, this build is very versatile in what it can do and achieve. It has a very high amount of damage, and it is overall a very good build if you want to play far away or up close and personal. It has a lot of different weapon options for those who want to try out different weapons. The cons to this build, however, is it is a little stat heavy, so you will need to build your 60 intelligence as well as your other stats if you want to be a Spellblade and use other weapons. And I hope this video got to show you the potential of a Spellblade, because it is honestly really fun. If this video helped you out, subscribing is always greatly appreciated, and liking the video, and I will see you guys later. Let me know in the comments what other guides you guys want to see, and I'll be happy to show them. Take care, peace, love and light.